Hello, dear people, wherever you're located on the planet. I hope you're having a majestic day, evening or night, where we're located. I want to talk about, on my comic book channel, something that I finally realized is involving vampires. You know, in every comic books, definitely with Marvel and DC, but especially with Marvels, vampires exist. In the 2016 or 2014, the strain was on, the cable channels. I forgot which cable channels. I guess it was Sci-Fi, one of them. But if I made a mistake, somebody correct me in the comment section which channel the strain used to come on. I've watched the strain numerous times. I usually have a yearly cycle when I watch the strain from start to finish. This year, however, I just decided to watch episode 4. I'm watching episode 4 now, and then it finally came to me. Back in the 80s, when I was a teenager, a young teenager, so you get an idea how old I am now. I was a teenager in the 1980s. I was a die-hard comic book fan. You know, at that time, in the 80s, it was basically Marvel Comic and DC. Them other ones didn't exist yet. I don't believe it. If I'm wrong, somebody can correct me. But the major two players, which they are now, but there's others who's right on Marvel's and DC heroes in this present era, 2021. But back in 1980s, the major players was Marvel and DC, and everybody else was a distant third. But anyway, I discovered something that I never realized by watching the strain. Both series had a special magic-based book that dealt with, among other things, destroying vampires. Yeah. And Marvel Comics, for some strange reason, it was called Darkhold. The book was called, I believe it, but I said I don't read comic books anymore, but I believe the book was called Darkhold. That's a dubious name, and it sounds really English-oriented, Darkhold, but I know it probably was in translation. And the strain is called, let me see, Occido Lumen, I believe. What is it called? The book called? Oh, yeah, Occido Lumen. At least it got a Greek. Not a Greek. It sounds more Latin. Occido Lumen. Darkhold, Occido Lumen. They was, from what I remember, they was both constructed by individuals who were spiritually based. Now, from what I can recall, because the strain came on about several years ago, so I'm not well versed in it, and I'm not well versed in Marvel Comics back because I stopped reading comic books. But I remember this with the Darkhold. It had like a evil presence on it. From what I remember the Darkhold, if a person had the Darkhold in their possession, and it was just a regular person, they wasn't spiritually based with the spirit of God in them. If it was a regular old person who holding the Darkhold, bad things would befall them. So the Darkhold in Marvel Comics was a book of like jinx. It was a book of evil. I think the same thing holds for the Occido Lumen. But the professor to track it, he was holding it like it was the Bible, so I don't know if that book has an evil presence on it. I don't know. But once more, if I'm wrong, somebody correct me in the comment section, because I'm saying Professor Satrakian and others. Oh yeah, but I do remember one thing about it. I'm going back in my memory because the strain out on that was like 4 years ago. It came to a conclusion in 2017, but I do remember this from the Occido Lumen. It said, just like the Darkhold, when it fell into the possession of certain individuals, if they didn't have the Spirit of God empowering them, and they just John Doe off the street, if they had it in their possession, evil would befall that person. I don't know what type of evil. I don't know. I don't know if they get hit by a falling piano, or people in their family died, or they just was jinxed and everything they did. But both books so-called had an evil influence. To overcome the evil influence, I know from Marvel Comics, you had to be like the Sorcerer Supreme or somebody like that. And even then, Doctor Strange, from what I recall in the 80s, even he had trouble holding on to that book for a long time because the evil was trying to take over him. But my main premise of making this recording is I discovered the Darkhold and the Occido Lumen. They had a commonality. They both had sacred texts on how to destroy vampires. Now, unfortunately, for the Strain, the spells were never fully implemented. If you watch the Strain, you know the book was just in its possession, but this book never really killed the vampires. But I think it gave information on, it gave you information on how to kill them with modern technology. So the book, it spoke cryptic passages like I said, the rays of God, the eyes of God. That's how the Occido Lumen would say things. In normal terminology, when it said the rays of God, normal humans interpret that mean a nuclear blast. That's what it meant when it said the eyes of God, the rays of God, the vision of God. The Occido Lumen from human interpretation mean, hey, get some nuclear bombs and blast the vampires into the next life. It was no special spells like in the Darkhold, because I remember back in the 80s to get rid of the classic Dracula. I know he looked different now, but the classic Dracula, he wore that black outfit on, had them leather, or had them special, I don't know what the shoes were, but he had them special black shoes on, and with that cape. That's the classic Dracula from the, and 1990s on into the earlier era. The classic Dracula, he wore all black, he had on a cape, and he came from, quote, Transylvania. But I think all Draculas come from Transylvania. Whether the present day Dracula, who looked like he's a superhero from what I saw of him, all of them came from Transylvania. But the classic Dracula had that black outfit on and that cape, and he was like a smooth womanizer from what I recalled. But anyway, in the Darkhold, to get rid of the vampires, you had to actually speak the passages like Zluma, Venescu, Manono, and you had to speak the language of it too. Venescu, Mamambo, Kazuda, blah blah blah, Anuga. And then when they kept saying that, the vampire started screaming out, Dracula started screaming out, oh! And then when he finished, because you remember, in the Darkhold, you had to read that destroy vampire passages from start to finish. You couldn't stop in the middle. Asudo, Kamuma, Manjamba, Hahanga. You had to read the whole thing. Then after that, Dracula went up in a puff of smoke. And you know when the head vampire disappeared, like with the Strain, when the head vampire is gone, all the other ones gone. But the Strain, the underlings didn't disappear, they just became inert. But with the Darkhold, it wiped out all the vampires. And I will give this to Marvel Comics. When they destroyed Dracula, the classic Dracula, he was dead a long time. He was dead longer than the Phoenix. Dead. Not as long as Captain Marvel, because Captain Marvel, they resurrected him, then they killed him again. But Dracula, the old classic Dracula, he was killed for at least a good 20 years. So when Marvel Comics read that Darkhold, he said, look, we're going to make this thing stick. He ain't going to come back next year or 3 years. When he read that Darkhold and Doctor Strange, the vampires was gone for about 20 years. I didn't see Blade for 20 years. But that's the main similarity, my people. And I guess since the Strain came out in the 2010s, it probably got that idea from Marvel Comics Darkhold. Because the Darkhold, like I said, I became aware of it in the 1980s. It probably was around all the way back into the 1950s or 60s. So, the strain, any modern vampire book, any modern vampire television show or movies, when they say refer to a book, they got the idea from Marvel Comics Darkhold. Now, I don't know if DC has some version of the Darkhold, because in DC Comics, from what I read, I primarily read Marvel, but I read DC too. I don't think DC Comics had a lot of supernatural entities. If they were supernatural, they only primarily dealt with Wonder Woman, and that was it. Because since Superman is the hallmark figure of DC Comics, they don't like to get into vampires, werewolves, goblins, and demons that much. Because since they spiritual entities, supernatural entities, they really will put a hurting on Superman. But Marvel Comics covered all gamut. Magic, science. Because you remember, Doctor Strange, from what, if I know, if it's true, it's still going strong today. I don't know, I haven't read it in a while. But Doctor Strange, a magic-based entity, he had a comic book a long time. DC Comics, they have like Dr. Fate, the Spectre, then not the Enchantress, but the woman from on the Justice League. I forgot, Xanta, who can speak words backwards and cause magic. Most Marvel, most DC, they never have a book, long-lasting book. Yes, they see Doctor Strange, he's a long-lasting series. DC don't have no long-lasting series of magical entities, because they don't want the magical entities to be fighting Superman and killing him. Marvel has that. So I'm saying, in conclusion, my dear people, the Occido Lumen probably was ripped off from Marvel Comics. I wonder if the people on that show had to give Marvel Comics some money. I wonder. Because, for all we know, they could have had the Occido Lumen imprinted on a wall. But it got so many pages. And I forgot all them pages. Where did they get the original information from? Because remember, written text, I'm going to say it probably happened around about the 17th century. So, was it on parchment and etc.? But hey, is that a fantasy? I know it's not real. Thank you for stopping by, my good people, in my recognition of where the Occido Lumen came from and its similarity to the Darkhold. The Occido Lumen, I know I'll probably be saying it wrong because I don't speak Latin. It came from Marvel Comics Darkhold. Thank you for stopping by there, people. If you're a comic book reader, keep reading, because I read comic books for about 40 years. Keep reading your comic books and enjoy them. Until the next episode, good people, peace.